All right, diving in today, and honestly, this one's a bit personal for me. Yeah, overthinking,
Right.
You guys sent in some seriously interesting stuff about this, and it's like, whoa, it's everywhere, right? Messing with our chill, our relationships, even like the whole vibe of society. So today's mission, if you choose to accept it, why do we get stuck in these mental hamster wheels? What's the damage, really? And most importantly, how do we break free?
You got it. And I got to say, the stuff you shared, it really hits home how common this is. It's not just like, oh, I'm worried about this one thing. For a lot of people, it's constant, like, background noise,
Totally.
And that study, I think it was from 2020, the one that said 73% of those 25 to 35-year-olds are dealing with overthinking, like, every day. It's mind-blowing.
Makes you think, right? Like, with all the thoughts we have, what was it? Something like 6,200 a day?
Yeah, around there.
No wonder someone gets stuck on repeat.
Like a broken record.
Exactly. And this isn't just like a little quirk. It's a big deal with some serious consequences. So let's unpack this.
Absolutely.
First off, just to be clear, what exactly is overthinking? Because, thinking deeply, being analytical, that's not always bad.
Right, right. And the sources you sent were really clear about this. Overthinking, it's like this. You're dwelling, you're replaying past mistakes over and over, you're stressing about the future. And here's the kicker. It's not actually leading to solutions.
Ah, okay.
You're stuck in the problem, not moving through it.
Gotcha. So it's not new, right? I mean, even those ancient Greek philosophers, Socrates and all, they were big on examining life, but I feel like there was also this sense of like, too much of that can be paralyzing.
You're totally right. That idea, too much analysis, leads to inaction. It's been around forever. Then fast forward to the 1970s, psychologists gave it a name, rumination.
Rumination.
It's that persistent negative thought cycle. And that's the term you see in a lot of the research, when they're really digging into overthinking.
And that research, it paints a pretty serious picture, doesn't it? Like you pointed out Dr. Susan Nolan-Hoeksema's work back in 1991. She found a strong link between rumination and, well, depression.
Yeah, that was a huge study. It showed us that this way of thinking, it's not just a result of feeling down. It can actually contribute to depression, make it worse.
So a vicious cycle.
Totally.
Yeah.
Now, you got to wonder, why are our brains even wired for this kind of endless looping? Evolutionarily speaking, being able to spot danger, that's essential.
Yeah, survival instinct.
But, and this is where the sources got really interesting, there's this mismatch between our ancient wiring and, well, modern life.
Ah, okay.
You see, our brains, they evolved when threats were, I ate this saber-toothed tiger,
Immediate danger.
Exactly. And that part of our brain, the amygdala, it's still on high alert.
Still looking for tigers.
Right. But now, our stressors, they're more like deadlines, social media comparisons, that kind of thing. Not the same kind of threat, but the amygdala, it doesn't always differentiate.
So we're on edge for, like, non-tiger threats.
Right, constantly. And that can lead to overthinking.
Right.
We're trying to solve problems that aren't even real emergencies.
So what's happening in the brain itself when we're stuck in those overthinking cycles? I remember the sources mentioned something about the prefrontal cortex.
Yeah, so the prefrontal cortex, that's your brain's CEO. Makes decisions, plans things out, solves problems. But with overthinking, it's like the CEO's stuck on one problem, going over and over it, never actually deciding anything.
Until exhaustion.
Big time.
Yeah.
And this overactivity, it triggers cortisol, the stress hormone.
So it's not just in our heads, it's physiological.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a whole cascade. But it's not just our brains, right? Our culture, our society, it seems like it almost encourages overthinking.
Oh, totally. Social media, always comparing ourselves, never feeling good enough.
The compare and despair cycle.
Ugh. Yes. And burnout, right? Everyone's always on, always hustling.
The WHO even recognized it as an official thing back in 2019. That constant pressure, it keeps our minds racing even when we're supposed to be chilling.
So common, deeply rooted, and fueled by modern life. Now let's talk about the consequences, the real damage. Starting with, well, our mental health.
Right, and this is where it gets serious.
Yeah.
Overthinking, it's a huge risk factor for anxiety disorders. One source even cited the APA. They said overthinkers are 3 times more likely to develop anxiety.
3 times.
That's not just a little worry now and then. It's a pattern that can seriously mess with your mental well-being.
And it doesn't stop there, right? The physical toll, it's real.
Oh yeah, that constant cortisol, it's no joke. Insomnia, huge problem. Can't shut off your brain, can't sleep. Cardiovascular problems, also linked. Elevated heart rate, blood pressure, all that. And even your immune system takes a hit.
So It weakens your defenses.
Basically, overthinking, it's stress, and stress affects everything.
It's not just us as individuals, though. Relationships suffer too, don't they? You shared some pretty compelling examples in the sources.
Oh yeah, the one about Sarah and Tom.
Yes. Constantly second-guessing, overanalyzing each other's every word and action.
Trust goes out the window. And that statistic, 68% of divorced couples saying overthinking was a factor.
68%.
Wow. It's not just about personal unhappiness. It can destroy relationships.
And it even affects how we parent.
You know, you read that and you think, wow, I didn't even realize. It's like parents who overthink, they can project their anxieties onto their kids. Overprotective, controlling, always worried about what might happen.
So the kid ends up anxious too.
It can happen. They absorb that energy, that worry. It can really hold them back from, exploring, being independent.
It's like this ripple effect, right? From our own minds to our relationships and then even to society as a whole.
And the societal costs, they're huge. Forbes, I think it was last year, they estimated $300 billion lost in the U.S. economy due to overthinking.
That's insane.
Right. Lost productivity, people can't focus, can't make decisions. And then there's the whole, overanalyzing other people's motives thing.
Oh, yeah. Always assuming the worst.
It creates distrust, division, fuels polarization,
Yeah.
makes it hard to connect with people.
So pretty bleak picture so far, but thankfully the sources didn't leave us hanging. They also explored ways to break free from these cycles.
Right, and CBT came up a lot, cognitive behavioral therapy.
See, yeah. How does that work?
So the basic idea is you identify and challenge those negative thought patterns that fuel overthinking, like all or nothing thinking.
You mean like, if this doesn't work out, I'm a total failure?
Exactly. Black and white, no gray areas. CBT gives you tools to examine those thoughts, question them, find a more balanced perspective.
Okay, that makes sense. And then there's mindfulness, meditation. I've heard that's good for quieting the mind.
Oh, it's huge. There was that JMAS study, 2021, I think. It found a 40% reduction in rumination after just 8 weeks of meditation.
Wow, 40%. That's significant.
It's about being present, noticing your thoughts without getting swept away by them. You create space, between the thought and your reaction.
I liked the 5-minute rule one of the sources mentioned. Seems pretty actionable.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. So worry pops up. You give yourself 5 minutes, literally set a timer to acknowledge it, maybe write it down.
Okay.
Then ask yourself, can I do something about this right now? If yes, do it. If not, let it go.
So no dwelling for hours.
Exactly. It stops those thoughts from spiraling, especially for things you can't control,
It's about moving from thinking to doing. One of the sources put it really well. Action cures fear.
That's so true. When we overthink, it's often because we're scared, uncertain.
Yeah.
But taking action, even a small step, it gives you a sense of control.
You're not just stuck, you're moving forward.
Right. Another good tip was setting time limits for decisions. No more endless agonizing.
Oh, I need that. I can spend hours weighing pros and cons.
So give yourself a deadline, 10 minutes, an hour, whatever. Gather info, consider your options, then decide. No more what-ifs.
Love it. But of course, sometimes overthinking, it's a sign of something deeper, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the sources were really clear about this. If it's persistent, interfering with your life, get professional help.
A therapist.
They can do a proper assessment, see if it's something like anxiety, OCD, depression. They have tools, therapies, that go beyond what we can talk about here.
That makes sense. And sometimes hearing how others have tackled this, it can be really helpful. The story about Alex, the software engineer, really resonated with me.
Oh, yeah. His story is inspiring. He used CBT, started journaling, and saw a 70% reduction in his overthinking.
70%. That's amazing.
And his mantra, action cures fear, it's a great reminder that we have the power to change this. We're not helpless.
So for those moments when the thoughts are racing, what can we do? I remember a grounding technique, the 5-4-3-2-1.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's about bringing yourself back to the present moment. Notice 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 sounds, 2 smells, 1 taste.
Engaging the senses.
It pulls you out of your head, grounds you in your body. Super simple, but it works.
So we've covered a lot. Overthinking is common, it has deep roots, it's fueled by modern life, and it can have some serious consequences.
But the good news is, it's not a personality trait. It's a habit. And habits can be broken.
The first step, it seems, is awareness. Noticing when those thought loops start.
Exactly. You can't change what you don't acknowledge. So pay attention. When are you replaying the past? When are you worrying about the future? Just notice it.
And then we've got those practical steps. Mindfulness, the 5-minute rule, therapy if needed. Maybe a simple starting point for our listeners is this. When those thoughts start spiraling, take a breath and ask yourself, is this thought helpful right now?
That's it. Pause, evaluate, and maybe choose a different path.
One of the sources ended with this quote: if you are depressed, you are living in the past. If you are anxious, you are living in the future.
So powerful, right? Overthinking pulls us away from the present moment.
And maybe that's the key. Being present is the antidote. So one last question for our listeners. What's one small thing you can do today to bring yourself back to the here and now? How can you escape those endless thought loops and find a little more peace?
You got this.
Thanks for joining us for the deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep thinking, and keep those minds from overthinking.